Good evening, and welcome to this evening's forum. It will entail a question and answer session for the majority of our hour and a half together. I'd just like to thank in advance parents that have submitted questions. My best guess is we probably will not get to the live questions, as there are about 540 questions that have been submitted so far. Before we begin, I'd like to go around the table and go over some introductions, please. Start with Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Pelucio, PCSA President.
Good evening, Melanie Ward, Assistant Superintendent for Instruction.
Hi there, Amy Thomas, Board President.
Darren Kenny, Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Support Services.
And I'd like to thank our panel for being here this evening.
To start our slideshow, and I have a brief slideshow, my hope is that we can begin just by getting in the right mindset, not just about this evening, but trying to put things in perspective relative to where we are, where we're heading, so that we have time to fully process what it's going to be like when schools open. First thing I think is critical to understand is that we're in a worldwide pandemic. Obviously, I know that you're aware of this, but this isn't something that locally we're contending with. This is something that schools across the country and the world are contending with. The other thing I will reiterate is that what we're going through is temporary. That means that there will be an end to this. And as we go through different models this evening, really, if I were to do this presentation over again, I'd put the word temporary in front of each model. So you'll be selecting a learning model for your child going into the year, but I think that in your mind, what you could say is, I'm signing up for a temporary learning model. We need to have patience and flexibility now more than ever. We need to rely on a strong sense of values, and we truly have to be a team during this process. And when I say we, that means all of our staff, our students, our parents, our community members, our Board of Education, our administrators, our bus drivers, our food service workers. We all need to work together. We need to show a sense of compassion. We need to show a sense of flexibility and patience like never before. And I would just close with that mindset of this is temporary. So as of right now, schools are likely to open, and whatever we open into, that process as it unfolds will certainly have an end in sight, is my belief. This mindset is important as a community. Without question, I know that there are polarizing viewpoints similarly across the nation. All of us have received several contradicting parent emails on both ends of the spectrum and many in between. Some saying, I can't believe you're even contemplating opening school, to the other extreme saying all schools need to be open without exception. When we look at this pandemic and talk about differences in medical opinions, as I meet with parents or talk on the phone, or meet with different doctors, albeit if it's a public health doctor or a pediatrician, while they might disagree at times, each has very compelling arguments. We in the school district have to rely on public health experts for guidance. So I work directly with Dr. Mendoza on a weekly basis to get his advice relative to making decisions. Mindset is also important because after tonight, I think that what might weigh on you is a sense of guilt or peer pressure to sign up for either a remote model or a hybrid model or an all-in-person model because your neighbors are doing it or because your child wants something different than maybe what you're thinking. I would just ask that you process this with your family, talk with your children, and make the decision that you feel is best for you, your child, and your family. And last, again, this is all temporary. So whatever that mindset is, know that hopefully within the first semester, we'll be back to a different model. On Monday, July 13th, Governor Cuomo announced that school districts in New York can follow plans to reopen for in-person schooling starting in September if our infection rates stay at 5% or lower in any given region. Currently, our infection rate is well below that. We are also in phase 4, which is another criteria for opening schools. The only way we would not open schools at this juncture is if our infection rate exceeds 9% on a 7-day average. That would shut down schools, certainly in our region. The last thing to share regarding opening schools is that we, starting tomorrow, have a deadline, actually effective tomorrow, to submit a plan to New York State that includes an in-person option, a remote option, and a hybrid option. Those plans will be posted on our website. They'll also be posted on the State Education Department's website and Department of Health as well. We have met regularly. I need to have a special thank you to our scenario planning steering committee members. Consists of parents and teachers and administrators. They have put in so much time and processed a very complex problem. And have really pushed all of our collective thinking relative to how we can come up with the best possible solutions. To date, what our team has done is we've met for several weeks of half days and morning meetings, or months rather. We've compiled and studied recommendations from the CDC, the AAP, the AFT, NICET, New York State Department of Health. We also reviewed multiple reopening plans from other states and countries. We've created and collected results from a parent survey that yielded about 3,000 responses. We've started the process for addressing each of the 3 scenarios. We've continued to look at the 3 models after our 2-day workshop, which included 70 stakeholders, and provided us a lot of feedback and actually more creative ideas relative to opening schools and what we can offer all of our family members. We receive guidance from SED, the Department of Health, the CDC. We also receive guidance from the governor's executive orders. And it was July 13th, late in the day, that we received the guidance that shared what we have to comply with in order to opening schools. I also meet with Dr. Mendoza once a week, and we've been doing that for several months. As a committee, we decided that it's important to have some district-wide overall expectations as it relates to starting school in the fall. And I think as an overall philosophy, it's important to note that we're starting very, very tight with a lot of our processes and procedures. And then as the weeks and months progress, we can start perhaps looking at doing things a little bit differently or introducing things that we weren't able to do before. And that is all based on the infection rates. So starting in September, we are going to minimize, significantly reduce visitors to the buildings. Students will not have assemblies. So you can see the theme of trying to reduce amount of people together or new people to our buildings. Field trips will be virtual only. Students will not use lockers, with the exception of one elementary school, and that's due to that school not having cubbies. We will, all buildings will have a plan for flow of student movement, and especially in the halls and the stairwells. There will be hand sanitizers available in all classrooms and all offices, and we're going to ask students right when they enter their very first classroom to use hand sanitizer. We will have masks being worn while entering the building and throughout the day for the most part. Staff and student screening will occur prior to attending every single day of school. And relative to the buses, we will certainly have assigned seats on the bus, which is another theme of trying to create pods or small groups of kids together. For those of you that recall how the transition went from last spring throughout June, there were certainly a lot of new learnings all of us went through, a lot of frustrations. Some of the things that you'll see different as we plan to open school this year is that there will be grading, there will be expectations for assessments, there will be report cards, there will be more regular feedback given to students, there will be daily attendance for all students, and we have eliminated the concept of having 8 or 9 or 10 different platforms relative to technology. In K through 3, our primary platform will be Seesaw, and in grades 4 through 12, our primary platform will be Microsoft Office 365 Teams. All grades K through 12 also can use Zoom for the video capacity. So I want to walk you through our options by level, and my hope is that it will provide you an opportunity to begin to visualize what school would be like so that you can make a better informed decision. If you have a child that's in kindergarten or entering through fifth grade, there are 2 options. One is for a fully remote learning, and the second one is for an in-person model. I'm going to talk first about the in-person models at both the elementary, middle, and high school, and then I will conclude with remote learning. With the in-person model for K-5, all students will attend school every day, Monday through Friday each week. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday will be full days. Wednesday will be an early dismissal day for students, and that's in order to allow time for teachers and support staff to have collaborative planning time that's essential to support instruction in this socially distanced model. And looking at how we're able to do this, one of the criteria that we utilized was reviewing the square footage of every room in all 5 elementary buildings. Actually, we did that through all 3 levels. And then we looked at how many students each room could accommodate, given that we are required to provide 6 feet of social distancing. It's also important to note that in order to accommodate all students being in the building, that we got very creative and we'll be using a variety of spaces beyond our typical classroom. So a typical day, K through 5, would look like waking up in the morning, and before you got on the bus or in the car or walking to school, there would be a pre-screening protocol that we would have parents do with their children. That would mean you would certify that your child does not have a temperature, and then go through a symptom checker to make sure that it's safe for your child to come to school. We'll share more about that later. We also, if a student goes through the pre-screening and is fine, and should he or she take the bus, masks must be worn on the bus. There will be drop-off procedures. There'll be separate procedures for walkers, those that take buses, and those that are being dropped off by parents. We're not sure what to anticipate based on what people's choices are going to be. So our hope is that we will have plans that will remove or alleviate congestion, so large groups of students walking through the doors at the same time. Upon entering school, students will walk directly to their assigned room. Students will then be in pods based on room size. All rooms are not created equal, so we have a typical classroom that may have 10 students 6 feet apart. We also have other classroom spaces that are a lot larger, so there may be 15, 16, 17 students that can be in that room 6 feet apart. We've used space creatively. Our use of space may look different across our 5 elementary schools. However, the one thing that's constant is that all students in every classroom will be 6 feet apart. A teacher will have a class rostered to 1 or 2 rooms. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. Teachers and or pods of students will be moving primarily between 2 spaces. And all learning spaces will be supervised with either a paraprofessional or a certified teacher. The way we were able to do this was using our staff and our room space very creatively. I have to thank our staff and all of those involved with allowing this to happen. So essentially, if I am a third grade teacher and I have, let's say, 20 students assigned to me, I may have 10 directly in front of me in my classroom, and then I'll have another 10 that's in a different room that's being supervised by either another teacher or a classroom paraprofessional. And then either myself as a teacher will walk down and spend time with the other class, or the other class may come down to me. And so there's a couple different ways that we're working through that, but the good news is we can do it. As students enter a class, they will go through a hand sanitizer protocol. Students and staff will be expected to wear masks throughout the day. We also understand how difficult that could be for our youngest learners, so there will be multiple mask breaks that will happen. Teachers will use strategies to allow for more large group instruction, but may also incorporate best practices such as station work. So if we have 10 students in a class, that becomes the pod. May have 5 stations around the room, 5 learning stations with 1 to 2 students at each station. So they can be at the station and still be separated. Special area teachers and support services teachers will either push in, meaning they go in and deliver services into the classroom, or when appropriate, walk a class to a large room or a larger space, which would also include taking students outside where it's easier to maintain social distance. One of the obstacles we have not figured out yet are around music, specifically chorus and band, and physical education, given the requirement of 12 feet of distance. All 5 buildings will create a plan as it relates to special areas that's equitable and safe, which means if I have 2 days of PE a week at Park Road, there will be 2 days of PE at Jeff Road and across the board. We don't necessarily know at this point if special area classes will meet with the frequency that they did last year. So that will be something that's modified and we'll monitor and adjust as we go. Lunches and snack time will be socially distanced and will be held within a classroom or other socially distanced rooms, and students will not be required to wear masks during this time. Attendance will be taken daily, and weather permitting, students will get outside for recess every day, and teachers will be encouraged to take students outside at other times of the day as well. We will look at hallway management and look at directionality and signs on the walls and possibly other places. We may stagger passing times a little bit. There will be report cards for students. There will be assessments for students. And then obviously at the end of the day, we'll be working through different dismissal protocols. On Wednesdays, students have a half day, K through 5. Dismissal will be around 11:45. This is something we're going to be working with our transportation department on. We are aware that this Wednesday does create a child care concern for many families. While I can't promise or guarantee anything, we are looking at different child care options as part of our creative problem solving. I think it's about a week and a half from now, I have several meetings scheduled with different child care facilitators, organizations, and we'll see if there's anything we can do for that second half of the day on Wednesday. The positive part of that half day for Wednesdays for students, especially as we start, it allows them 2 straight days, and then it gives them a little bit of a breather during the week. And during that breather, if you will, our hope is that it prepares them in the event we have to go all remote, in the event the pandemic infection rates spike. So our thinking during that half day would be students would have an assignment like email the teacher. that allows them to get into the habit and routine of how to log in, how to send an email. It will help them better understand how to use that one technology platform. So in K3, it would be Seesaw. In grades 4 and 5, it would be Microsoft Office, Teams. It will also allow some asynchronous activity to occur, and it will help students gradually learn to be a little bit more independent as it relates to working remotely. And on the flip side, the positive for staff is that it's necessary for this model to work specific to affording planning time. That is K through 5, and that is one option for in-person. As we transition to our secondary schools in grades 6 through 12, there will be two choices. One is fully remote, and the other one is a hybrid choice. So I'd like to start with the hybrid choice for our secondary schools. Students will be divided essentially into two groups. Let's call each one Group 1 and Group 2 for now. Group 1 may be in school on Mondays and in Thursdays. And then the days not in school, they will be learning remotely. Similarly, Group 2 will work in opposite ways. So when Group 1 is in school, Group 2 will be learning remotely. There is a Group 3, which is our students that are English language learners and our special education students in our district-based classes. They will attend school on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday and participate in remote learning on Wednesday. I'm going to just talk about some of the subtleties, the differences between middle school and high school in this hybrid model. A typical day for grades 6, 7, and 8 in this hybrid model is very similar to elementary school in that there will be a pre-screening protocol, masks at the bus, there will be drop-off procedures, there will be a room assigned to them to go to immediately while entering the school. There will be no lockers at either middle school, hand sanitizers when you enter your initial room. Students will be in pods for the majority of the day. And all learning spaces will always be supervised with either a paraprofessional or a certified teacher. There will be hallway considerations for flow of traffic. There will be some changes to our special area classes, especially those that met every other day. So for example, art may meet every day for a half a year instead of every other day for a full year. Like elementary school, we have questions that are unanswered around chorus and band and physical education. Students will also receive multiple mask breaks during the day. They will have lunches in their classroom or other areas that would make sense. We will not be having middle school lunches as we know them in the cafeteria with 6 to 8 students around the table. So we will practice social distancing in multiple rooms. Students will change classrooms for world language, support services, and several special area classes. There will be a sign-out process for teachers and other staff to use spaces for social emotional learning, to give students a break, to do some team building, to get students moving, more creative, etc. There will be attendance, assessments, and report cards, and then there will be a structured dismissal. What about the days when the hybrid students in middle school are remote? So I am in group 2 and group 1 is in front of the teacher. What am I doing while I'm at home? Students will log in for attendance using either Microsoft Teams or Zoom, depending on what the teacher has required. So every day, students are going to be in school at the middle level. Even when they're remote, they're going to log on. Attendance will be taken. Students will go through their typical schedule when they're home. Every day is a school day. Students will be assigned work for that scheduled period from when they were in person with the teacher or when they log in. So in other words, if I'm remote, I'm going to know what I have to do during that period because my teacher told me the day before, or because I found out when I logged in what my assignments are going to be. And then there are the Wednesdays when students are home. They will still follow their schedule. They may receive synchronous or asynchronous assignments. There could be an opportunity for social emotional learning with a full class or a team. It may be a time when assessments are given, maybe an opportunity for more feedback and questions. It will be a day of attendance. And I have the word other because I think that our teachers will come up with a lot of creative solutions and ideas for ways to maximize a well-rounded education by utilizing the Wednesdays for all their students. Shifting gears to high school, what would a typical day look like, grades 9 through 12? You can see all the same things as elementary and middle school. There'll be hallway considerations, music and PE, questions remain. Students will follow their schedule and they'll be traveling between classes. We are considering strongly closing campus for lunches. So if you're leaving the campus, that should be for dismissal or for an appointment, but not leaving for lunch. Lunches will be spread out. They will be socially distanced. Students will not wear masks, and they will have options of rooms that are to be determined. There will again be report cards, assessments, and homework. The hybrid remote, when you are not in front of a teacher, is the same as middle school. And the Wednesdays are very similar, actually identical to middle school as well. This is a day where teachers will certainly have some autonomy to work with students, again, while the students are following their schedule. That leads us to the last option, and this is K-12. This is where there's a lot of unknowns with remote learning, primarily because what we have to do is match teachers with students. And at this point right now, we do not know what students are going to choose remote learning and what staff will be pulling from. So as the lowest bar, what we can promise you is that if you're in remote learning, that a focus will be on core classes. There will be a focus on graduation requirements. You will still be using a single platform. More than likely, there will certainly be limited choices in things like electives or special areas. Students will be rostered to a certified teacher. It may not be a teacher that's in the building. So for example, if I am a second grader at Allen Creek, my second grade remote learning teacher may be from Jeff Road. We have to find a way to match teachers with students, and this will be unknown until registration. This is the last part of the presentation, and it's probably the most important of all that I've shared so far. Tomorrow morning, you will receive at around between 10:30 and 11 o'clock an email from your building principal or building principals. If you have a student at the elementary and middle level, you'll receive 2 emails, one from the elementary and one from the middle school. What we are requiring is that students need to be enrolled for a school program by August 10th. The registration that you receive via email tomorrow, via a link, is mandatory, as it will be essential for us to have a few weeks to schedule students, assign rooms, teachers to students, and complete bus routes, etc. This is typically about a 6-month job, so we will be all hands on deck figuring this out. You'll be required to select one option per child. If you have children at multiple schools or levels, you will be receiving multiple enrollment forms, and each child will need to be registered separately. And they can also select different things. You may have a student that's a really wonderful independent learner, and you think remote learning is the best option. And then a different child in the same family, you may elect to do an in-person model or a hybrid. This is a sample of what the enrollment or registration form will look like. I pulled this one from Allen Creek. There will be a short amount of questions. the two biggest questions. The first is select your option. So for elementary, your options would be in-person model every day or remote learning. And there is a third area to check off, which is homeschooling. That's always been an option for parents. But if you are going the homeschooling route, know that that's a whole separate process. And there's contact information on the questionnaire for you to reach out to Dr. Von Brogan if homeschooling is what you prefer. The second biggest question, maybe it's the first biggest question, is around transportation. This is our single biggest hurdle with providing in-person options. So we're asking you to check one of these boxes. They're going to look a little bit different, elementary versus secondary. Essentially, at both levels, we're asking if you can commit to transporting your child every day to and from school, meaning you don't need a school bus. The other option is that you need to rely on a school bus, and then you can see the other two. And then at the end of the survey, what we're asking you to certify or confirm is that once you select an option for a program, you will remain in this option for the first semester, unless something happens like we all have to go to remote learning. We are feeling strongly about this, given a lot of different factors, especially the amount of scheduling and attaching students to teachers and not breaking sections after we have classrooms figured out and social distancing figured out. So we're going to ask for you to really think through this process and commit to an option through the first two marking periods of the first semester, which is at the end of January.
Thank you. So my hope is that you have a better visual of the learning models that you will be selecting. We have about an hour left, and we'd like to use this time for questions. And our wonderful host, our PTSA president, is going to ask away.
Thank you, and thank you for listening to the parent concerns and including all the parents in your reopening plans. We appreciate that. So the first question is under the category of full-time remote or online learning. If a student is learning full-time at home, will they be able to participate in any after-school activities, clubs, sports, or music ensembles that may happen throughout the year?
We are starting the year very tight, and then if numbers look favorable, we may consider loosening up. As we look at our opening in September, regardless of the model that you're in, we will not be providing options for extracurricular clubs. We're looking at bare bones, first period through ninth period, or from 8 in the morning to 3 o'clock in the afternoon for elementary school. You're going to be in school, then we want to get you safely home, and then we want to disinfect the schools and then start a new day.
Thank you. Technology question, will the district supply home computers if necessary?
Starting next week, there will be another email. I'm sorry in advance. It's going to ask families if what their needs are for technology, especially for grades 6 through 12 to begin. And any family that is in need of a laptop, we will provide one.
Thank you. A scheduling question. Is there any effort going into ensuring that students from the same family have the same home learning days across the district?
Yes. Families, we absolutely will do everything in our power to keep together. And actually, Sarah, that reminds me of another thought. When we have students that are divided into group 1 and group 2, we haven't made a decision yet if that's going to be alphabetical or if that may be by neighborhoods. Thinking that if it's by neighborhoods, there's benefits, possibly with transportation or carpooling for parents. We're running numbers right now to see how evenly they can be split. High school is a little bit more complicated, but we're looking at both options.
If parents decide to send their kids to school but become uncomfortable with the rate of spread of the virus, can we easily opt out to switch our children to remote or online learning? I
will share, so I just got done saying, parents have to commit to this model until January 29th. That would be a consideration to move to remote learning. But moving from remote to in-person would be much more difficult to do. The other part that we still need to figure out will become more clear after enrollment and registration comes in, to see how much space we may have in different classes, which may offer some flexibility moving forward.
How will the district support parents with distance learning in the fall?
Well, one of the ways is that we have really 3 platforms. Zoom is one, and then we have Seesaw for K3, and then Microsoft for grades 4 through 12. We will absolutely be providing professional development for parents, as we have been for staff, and which we will be for students, especially as we begin opening.
I can add a little bit to that, Sarah. So in addition to providing parents with support around the technology platforms, we also are, at the elementary level, we are preparing what we're calling home learning kits for every child. So it will include, it'll be like a big Ziploc baggie that will include very simple materials that kids would be able to access at home in the event that we go to full remote learning. So teachers would know exactly what children had at home that they could tap into. So it's things like a small whiteboard and whiteboard markers. It's counters for math. It's some basic tens frames and some phonics cards and whatnot. So every child will be sent home with a home learning kit probably the first week of school and asked to keep it there at home, so that if we have to pivot to remote learning in an overnight scenario like we were last March, that those materials will be at home and kids and teachers will be able to interact with them in a remote environment as well. We'll also continue to look at how we can support families with helping to set up schedules for kids at home, helping to work with their kids around what it means to be learning at home, whether we're full remote or whether we're at the hybrid model at the secondary level. Really doing some work around supporting your student with what school looks like in that environment, and setting aside a place and having a schedule that kids will have to follow with their teacher, which hopefully will ease some of the difficulties that we know families faced in the spring.
Thank you. A question about buses. How will social distancing on buses be handled and enforced?
There is some confusion in the guidance right now that we're trying to get from SED. Everything from 1 child per seat, alternating rows, to 2 children in a seat. So that has a drastic impact on what the bus can hold. A standard full-size bus, that could be anywhere from 11 students up to 44. So we're trying to get that clarification right now.
I think this is a good time to share that we are concerned about transportation. We're concerned about what the SCD guidance may entail, and what we're required to do as far as social distancing, only because we were already, all of us across the county and across the state, have a shortage of bus drivers. And if we can only carry half a fleet at one time, or possibly less, then we would probably have to look at altering our schedules a little bit.
So some questions with COVID and testing. If a classroom has a positive case, will you quarantine the class, those in contact with that teacher or student, for 2 weeks, or will it be to a larger extent?
Pat, I'm going to start this, and then if you want to jump in, feel free. Did you hear the question okay?
Yes, I did.
So in our plans that we submit, there will be a pretty robust plan that involves a flow chart and different scenarios. It's a tough question to answer because there's so many different scenarios that could take place within this. Last evening, Dr. Mendoza and the Public Health Department took my cell phone number and took Dr. Von Brogen's cell phone number, and should anyone be test positive at any point during the day or at night, we would receive a phone call. We would look at probably to start by quarantining a pod. So if we're at the elementary level and students are in their pod of 10 students, more than likely that pod of 10 students would be quarantined for 14 days along with the adult in the room. Then it becomes different if the student took the bus to school. And now we're looking at what that would entail as far as contact tracing. It would depend if the student tested positive right when they got back from, let's say, a vacation or a state that's on the list for high infection rates. It becomes trickier when we get to the high school level and doing the contact tracing, which is why attendance everywhere is going to be critical, so we can go back and check to see what students were exposed and then in what capacity. So was it a quick walk by, or was it a 3-minute conversation in the hall, or were they partners for something for 40 minutes in a classroom? Those are the types of different things that we would look at. But a big factor would be making that decision with Monroe County Health Department. It's not something that Dr. Von Brogan or I would do in isolation. Pat, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I would add, Mike, first, thanks for letting me participate remotely, that in all of our conversations with our school district physician and the state, and certainly yours with Dr. Mendoza, that local public health official will really guide our actions. We have models that we would follow, but depending on the circumstances, we would really rely on Dr. Mendoza and his staff to direct us.
Thanks, Matt.
What do you imagine will be the social emotional impact on the student who initially tests positive and their process moving forward to come back into school?
Our reality is that everywhere we go, there's going to be a level of risk. And our job in reopening school is to do everything that we can to mitigate that risk. And then, of course, students and families leave our schools and go elsewhere, and they may contract COVID wherever they may be outside of school. So in the event that someone is or does test positive, we really have to look at a lot of different scenarios. The first thing I think it's important to share is that the Monroe County Health Department has my cell phone number, has Dr. Von Brogan's cell phone number. As soon as a student or staff member is test positive, then either Pat or I or both will receive a call from Monroe County Health Department, and that will start the process. From that point, we have to look at what are our options, and specifically based on all the different parameters leading up to the positive test. So, for example, if it is a 4th grader whose parents drove him or her to school, and that 4th grader was in a pod of 10 students most of the time, then it's likely that we would probably quarantine that pod and the adult in the room for 14 days. If that same student had taken the bus to school, then we'd have to look at where he or she was sitting and do contact tracing in that regards, which may expand the quarantine. It could be an issue where a student at the high school has tested positive. And high school is a little bit different because of the movement that happens and students transitioning from class to class. But even that movement is different. There's a difference if I pass a student in the hall for 5 seconds and I have my mask on, then I probably wouldn't have to quarantine. But if I was in a classroom with the student for 40 minutes sitting next to him or her, then I certainly may have to. We will not make a call about closing schools or quarantining pods or kids. That will be something that we do in consultation with Dr. Mendoza from Monroe County Health Department. The other question that you asked when our stream was down was regarding what happens if a student tests positive and the impact on him or her socially and emotionally. And I would answer that in a couple different ways. Every student is certainly different. Some are more resilient than others and will not take that as hard. But it's our expectation that when students are in school or when they're on social media, that there is not bullying and that there's not teasing. And so we would have to treat it that way, as bullying and teasing, if students are going out of their way to make a student feel bad for contracting a virus. We would also do some things proactively. So as we look at opening our schools, working with our students around what happens if someone does get the virus, and how that's a time where we need to support that student and help the student instead of going out of our way to make them feel bad.
Will plexiglass shields be put into use for times that kids cannot wear their masks, like snack and lunch?
We do not see a scenario where we're not able to maintain 6 feet of social distancing. So plexi shields will not be used. We will look at the directionality of students when they're eating. So in other words, students should be 6 feet apart on both sides, front and behind, and facing forward. But as far as plexiglass, we have not ordered any or plan on using the plexiglass shields because we're able to socially distance.
So related, will children not wearing face masks because of medical exemptions be allowed in classrooms and or be interacting with children and teachers who are wearing masks?
So I would say that's a question that we need to process further, to be very candid with you. I will share that I know that people are going to be on edge when school starts. People are going to be on edge when students aren't wearing masks. We will continue to look at the guidance around that, but also we really need to think through strategies to make a determination of the role that could play for a student that is medically unable to wear a mask.
What measures are in place for cleaning the classrooms, and will students have access to sanitizers, wipes, everything throughout every classroom throughout the day?
Well, that's another area that we're still processing, is the student piece of it. We do know that we're going to be wiping down keyboards, teacher keyboards, doorknobs. We're going to be disinfecting regularly. All classes will have hand sanitizer. We'll have additional masks for anyone that needs them. There will be protocols in place for having a classroom disinfected before another class comes in. The question of can a student do that, we just started discussing, and my sense is that possibly an older student versus a younger student. Do you want to add anything to that, Darren?
Sure. I would just add that the products that we are using are CDC approved that will kill coronavirus on contact. And it's a process that you can mist it. It's a pump sprayer. Each classroom will have it. We'll have it in many other areas as well. It kills it on contact. It evaporates within 10 minutes or less, or you can wipe it off.
Thank you. Why isn't there a hybrid option for grades K through 5? How did you come to that decision?
At some point, you get to a capacity issue and attaching staff to students. Our first focus was to even see if it was at all possible to bring students K through 12 in at the same time. And we started to stop when we realized at the 6 through 8 level, we were going to need at minimum 16 additional staff to be hired to possibly make that happen. And so then we also realized that at the elementary level, we're going to need more coverage and support in classrooms. And so if the middle school were hybrid, then it would free up some staff to help support the elementary in 5 days. The other part is the logistics of childcare. I'm very sensitive to the fact that many of our families have a single parent or have dual working parents or guardians, and that's making them choose between their job or childcare. The other part is the developmental piece. What we found last year when we were remote, especially our kindergarten, first, second, third graders, the concept of learning independently and remotely really wasn't going to happen without an adult right there with them. So there was a lot of reasons not to look at a hybrid model at the elementary level. There's again, it's staffing, it's developmental appropriateness, it's childcare, it's a lot of things, and we were able to do this 5 days a week. So we feel really comfortable with the model we're presenting.
Switching over to high school, will late arrival be allowed for juniors and seniors who have study hall first thing on their schedules?
I'm not sure if schedules like that are going to stay the same. What we do know is that we are going to have a homeroom in the high schools for all students to report to first period. So we have changed that schedule around. Melanie, I don't know if you have more insight.
So I think that's a level of detail we haven't completely gotten to at the high school level. I do know that that what we have talked about at the high school is if students, juniors and seniors, have what would traditionally be a free period in the middle of the day, they will be assigned to a study hall. So they'll be in a place where we can be sure that they're being appropriately socially distanced, and they'll have a staff member supervising them.
Can you explain a little bit about the ventilation systems in the buildings and whether or not that meets the criteria that the governor has put out there?
Due to all the work that we've done over the last 20 years in our buildings, we exceed what the governor has been talking about, as well as the guidance from SED mentions that as well, that all systems in schools since that period of time, they have approved those systems and are designed to a certain level that meets or exceeds what the governor is talking about. And in fact, we are not even, they told us we're not even authorized to make changes to that system without SED approval first, because they don't want changes to something that's already been designed and approved by SED.
A big part of our capital projects has been our HVAC and air handling units, and I feel all of us should feel very good about the amount of air circulation across all 9 buildings. And essentially we're taking about 20% or more of outside air and circulating it constantly throughout our schools. We'll also look at doing taking some other steps to enhance that further, such as having windows open in classrooms. That will also enhance the circulation of air. But as far as our infrastructure and our airflow and circulation, we're beyond the regulations.
How did you come up with a Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday grouping for in-person learning as opposed to 2 consecutive days?
The concern about 2 consecutive, we did talk about both. We talked about everything from 1 week on, 1 week off, 2 consecutive days. We looked at I think our biggest concern was when you're on 2 consecutive days, if you're on Mondays, Tuesdays, that means that you were without a teacher Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday for 5 consecutive days. And we felt going 5 consecutive days without having a teacher in front of you was not a best practice. Then as a county, as we started to share our plans, we all started to shape our plans so that Wednesdays was the day, which also helps us with transportation, shared services, with BOCES services. So as a county, I'm really proud of the superintendents to make this a reality.
Regarding kindergarten screenings didn't happen this spring like they normally would have. Is there a plan for when those may happen?
Either you or Pat.
Yep. Pat, jump in if you want to add anything. We decided not to do kindergarten screenings this summer because our typical kindergarten screening procedure involves multiple adults in one space, close contact with children, and a lot of protocols that we didn't feel we were prepared to put in place for the summer. We are required to do some kindergarten screening, but the state has extended the window of time by which that needs to be completed this year. So we will be looking at a way to meet those obligations once students are in school. It will look a little different this year than it typically does, but we will look for ways to accomplish and meet our requirements once kids are in the classroom with us.
What about playground time for the elementary buildings?
Playground time is still on the table for kids. We believe very firmly that more than ever, it's going to be important to get kids outside, get them active, and allow them time to be kids outside in some fresh air. At the elementary level, they will be looking at using their outdoor spaces by sort of sectioning them. Most of our buildings are fortunate to have very generous space outside for students to play during recess. And so they'll keep their pods together in a certain designated space in the recess area. You know, some kids it'll be, you know, on Mondays it's your turn to play on the blacktop, and on Tuesdays it's your turn to play on the playground structures, et cetera. But we very much want kids to be outside playing as much as possible, and the state guidance does tell us we're allowed to have kids using our playground structures.
Will teachers and staff be required to have COVID testing, or what will the health protocols be for them?
We've been following all of the Department of Health, CDC, and guidance from SED. And at this point, there's nothing in the guidance that is requesting or requiring COVID testing prior to or during the school year for students and staff. So at this point, it has not even been a discussion.
What about after-school labs at the high school or middle school levels? Are those still happening this year?
Labs are things that we're still processing. Right now, we're in the conversation mode around 10th period. Is 10th period something that we still do? Again, part of the reason it's a challenge is if we have a 10th period, that also is going to involve more transportation. And we're not going to be able to make that decision until we know how many students are going to be signing up for hybrid versus remote learning, and how many parents will be driving versus requiring the bus. So 10th period may also be attached to whether or not we can take students home after.
Sarah, I would just add to that a little bit. Whether 10th period labs happen or not, we are required to have students meet their lab minutes to take a Regents exam, but the state has provided us with flexibility this year for whether those labs are live traditional experiences or simulation virtual lab experiences, so we can balance the two. So we will find a way to give kids the opportunities that they need to have those lab experiences, so that they can do the learning that they need to do, regardless of whether we're able to schedule those in a traditional 10th period lab or we need to push those into another part of the day or the week for students.
Okay. Another question related to grading and testing: will kids have to take the Regents exams at the end of the year, the state testing at the younger grade levels? Where are we with that?
The state has not made a determination about that this year. They have not taken it off the table. So we would head into this year under the assumption that we will see the resumption of 3 through 8 testing and Regents exams this spring. I think it's just far too early for the state to have made a decision on that.
You did mention the RAP program and whether or not there would be something for childcare for the elementary students on that half-day Wednesday, but kids that are right now slated to go from one building to another at the end of their school day, is that still on the table? Is that the RAP program and the transportation to that still happening?
I'm thinking that only involves one of our buildings, and again, in a week and a half, I'm meeting with our providers to see what our options will be. We also don't know at this point how many parents are in need of that. A lot of that is attendance driven, and if there's enough at a building, then we have it in the building. So certainly more to come there.
K through 12, will the report cards look different if they're choosing the hybrid model or the remote model?
So to some extent, there's a level of detail we haven't gotten to there again, and I hate to keep saying that, but this has been a very complex thing to work through. We will be giving kids report cards, as we always do, other than last spring. Whether kids if kids are in the hybrid model, 6-12, they'll be held to the same learning standards. They'll be following their schedule. They'll be taking all of their coursework that they normally would, so they will receive a traditional report card with grades for every course that they're taking. Where I think we still are going to have to work out some details are for those students who opt for the remote learning environment, where we are still working through that process of attaching staff to students and understanding the course selection that will be available to students. But students will have assessments, they will receive grades. But I think for those kids who are choosing the remote learning environment while we're in person, there may be some adjustments made.
I think I would say there may or may not be adjustments made.
I have a lot of repeat questions, so, yeah, if you want to do that.
I would close one by apologizing. Not sure what happened. I know that people are very anxious about having this communicated with them this evening. By Monday, this will be posted on our website, and you'll be able to view the entire presentation, including the questions and answers. Our communication will continue to flow. One of the things we also want to be careful about is not causing information overload, not only to our community, but to our staff as well. So as I look at the next week ahead, you're going to be thinking about and signing up for your temporary program of choice. The sooner those come in, the better able we are to begin our planning. You'll also be receiving a survey around technology in grades 6 through 12, so we can make sure we're accommodating all students' technological needs, especially given that K-12 or 6-12 is in a hybrid mode, and we're going to have more reliance on technology than ever before. I want to thank everyone for whomever is going to watch this recording, and I ask that you try to take things in stride. Please ask questions. We're going to keep our website very active with our Q&A. We'll be as timely as possible. And again, there may be questions that we can't answer. We look forward to having school resume regardless of what it looks like. And I would also share that if you are selecting the remote model, that you are still a Pittsford student. You're still a Pittsford parent, and we're here to support you. The difference is going to be that we're not going to see you in person, but we're still here, and we want to support you in any way we can. I'm hoping everyone is finding their own ways to stay healthy and happy and appreciative of all the small things around them. Want to thank you for logging in tonight and apologize again for the technology. Have a great evening.